like to call the meeting to order. It's 6:36 p.m. on June 20th, 2019. Would you all join me in rising and saying the Pledge of Allegiance together? Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, guys.
I thought it was me. All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm Holly Heslin. I was at the last meeting elected the chair of this committee. And on our agenda, the next order of business are public comments. So, comment. Does anybody have any comments? Yes,
I do. Do you mind if I sit?
I don't have a problem. Does anybody in the committee?
No, not at all.
I have a couple of issues.
Name and address?
Paul Antonini, Jacobson. I have a couple of issues I'd like to bring up. One is an ongoing issue from many, many meetings that we have in this town, and that is recording public comments. Nothing personal, but time after time, I see comments that don't reflect what the people really said at the meetings. And, I'll use myself as an example from the last meeting, that just the first thing I said was taken, which was the least important thing that I said. And nothing else was mentioned that was more important. Another meeting, it just happens to be the first religious display meeting last year. I submitted a letter. I read the letter, and I submitted it into the record, and it wasn't even referred to in the meeting minutes, and there was no attachment or anything like that. So I just thought I'd note that, we have videos, which is good, because you can see what everyone says, but the recording of the meeting minutes needs to be improved, no matter who does it. Because, I don't expect you to write every word that everybody says, but you can write the gist of the topics that they cover.
Yeah.
And if you leave some topics out, that's bad. Okay, second point about public comments is that they're at the beginning of the meeting. A lot of people, I've seen many, many times comment on that we make our comments and then you have your meeting and we have so many issues fresh because we just listened to the meeting and we can't say anything. So that maybe you should have comments in the beginning and end, that would be even better. I've seen people ask questions and they're never answered. That's another point. When do we get to ask questions? If not in the comments, then when? I don't see it happening. Okay. Now I have a pretty heavy issue to discuss. It's regarding two of the members on your committee. I'll direct this to the whole committee. It's regarding Danielle and Mary. I don't even know these people, but I feel there is a character issue.
Point of order. This is not a forum for personal attacks or personal comments.
You can't interrupt me. You keep cutting me off. This is public comment. I'm allowed to say what I want.
This is inappropriate to single out individuals.
It regards something I'm going to ask of the committee.
Okay, then you should ask the chairperson privately if it's appropriate. We are not going to allow personal character discussions about any individuals. These people have all
I'm not
volunteered.
discussing their issues, I'm just saying names.
We are not singling out anybody, Paula. We're not doing it.
And you're going against Robert's rules.
No, I'm not. I'm following Robert's rules.
And I didn't bring that.
You're cutting me off, you're not allowing me to say what I'm
Can
going to say.
Can I just say that I did not bring Robert's rules with me. I had it last meeting, and unfortunately, I left it on my kitchen table. But Paula, I think that any concerns that you have concerning members of the committee should probably be submitted privately in writing.
Okay.
And can be addressed outside of the meeting.
Okay, but
Thank you.
all right, then I'll go to my next point.
And I think that conforms with
Okay.
what Robert's rules would.
Fine, I'll
Say.
discuss it
Thank
with
you.
you in private then.
Thank you.
If you could give me some contact information.
Okay.
I want to go to my next point then, that the issues that I'm not allowed to discuss, greatly affect the effectiveness of this committee. And I feel that it pretty much, even though, First Selectman, you did say that you took anybody who applied, and there was only a certain number of people that applied to this committee, it is the same exact people of the controversy from last year.
Those people
And-
have rights as well. They,
You're gonna interrupt me?
I'm gonna point that out, yes.
Well, let me speak. So, with all due respect, I have the floor. So, I feel that if there's only going to be this extreme opinions and almost arguing going on, there was a hot point at the last meeting when the word lawsuit was mentioned. And the same issues were being argued over. And I couldn't even watch it because it happened so much last year. And so I'm not quite sure if this committee can be fair and just. I'm not saying everyone on the committee, but I'm just saying if there are still those strong feelings, people with strong feelings, they're not going to be able to see clearly. Okay. I don't want to see a double standard, is what I'm talking about. You cannot judge this sensitive issue if you are out there, when you're not on this committee, doing something exactly the opposite. I'm just going to make a general statement in that direction. I want to say that we don't have a diversity problem in this town. You need to address the source of where the problem is coming from. And I feel that it's only a few people. You were talking about percentages, Fran, but and I don't want to point fingers, but it's obvious that we have had this nativity display for 40 years in the same spot. And it's been beautiful. There have been great celebrations, non-religious, all kinds of people. We have, then suddenly last year there were a lot of problems. I feel that there was a problem made where really none exists, and that we really, the problem is more one of hate. I hate to say that, but it is one of hate more than rights. And even at one of the last meetings, well, it was a committee member from this committee, but she was in the audience at another meeting, said she felt it was a mean-spirited gesture that was happening. And we're not going to go into the letter from the lawyer and all of that, from that other group. I'd like to ask, and I'm not asking directly because I probably can't ask the question, but I'd like to ask why there is a deadline of June 30th for you guys to settle this tremendous problem that I see taking 6 months to a year of monthly meetings to really digest all the parts. This gives you one more meeting, if I'm not correct, to come up with all these solutions. I don't see that happening, and I'd like to know why there's a deadline, and I'd like to know why it wasn't questioned by the committee when that deadline was placed upon you. I also feel that, now this may go by rules, I don't know, but in my viewpoint, in my opinion, I feel that the first selectman shouldn't be making suggestions to the committee that's going to make suggestions to the board of selectmen. I feel that's very influential, it's inappropriate, and it doesn't seem right to me because there were a lot of issues that were commented upon. I realize the lawyer's gonna come into this, but that's just my opinion. He may be allowed to do that, I don't know. I want to make sure that both committee and the board of selectmen know that they're supposed to represent the voice of the majority of the people. Yes, they should be inclusive, but if there's 18,099 people that want something and a few people that don't, you have to pay attention to that. I think you went over that in the last meeting. No one is denying anybody any rights. Again, you need to look at the sources that this is coming from. question about, the length of time that this committee covers, which is, it was supposed to be, I thought, all holidays, all year. And it kind of was being squashed into just the holiday season and just certain holidays, et cetera. So that kind of needs to be clarified. And I want to know when that was decided and who decides it, if it is just covering a short amount of period. Okay, I'm going to just make a summary and say that unless you're going to have a fair and unbiased individuals on this committee that is charged with solving a complex issue, this committee needs to be disbanded, because it would be a sham if you do not have strong people on the committee. Unless you're going to discover what the real or actual problem is, this committee will continue to go around in circles. The problem is not diversity or rights. It is a hatred problem by a few infiltrating our community. And I'm not pointing to any particular group. It's just any hatred that comes in for that reason alone to try and push out other things. That's the way it appeared. We see that that's the way it appeared. Maybe that wasn't their aim. Drumming up problems where there were none. For 40 plus years, our community has lived in harmony. Ask yourself, why now? Why is there suddenly such controversy? Before you even attempt to address this controversy, you need to clean house and first realize what the real problem is that you're addressing. Are you being fair to residents? Are you fully addressing issues they bring to your attention? Or is this simply a continuation of the argument from the same controversy?
Paula?
With the
I don't mean to interrupt, and I'm not trying to abridge your rights at all, but I think you're now just starting to go back and reread, summarize, and I don't think we need a summary. I've taken extensive notes on your comments, and now you're starting to repeat the things that I've already written. So unless you have something new, I'm going to ask to wrap up in the interest of time. I'm waiting. Anything new?
You're gonna make me speed read here.
No.
All right, well, a summary is kind of going over your points. All right, it's one thing to have an opinion. It's quite a different issue to have a hidden hate agenda. I'm seeing hatred for part of me, our community, and that's not what we are about, or who we have been, or what we want to be in the future. It's an attack on the peacefulness and loving community we once were, and it is making a problem where none really existed. Well, there's some things I want to say, but I'll skip over them because you seem to.
No, I don't want you to skip over anything. It's just,
Okay,
I'm
then
just
can I
looking
talk
for
about the
brevity.
beautiful event that happened in the PT Barnes. Like the first thing, I'll just do it extemporaneously. The first thing I noticed in this community is that very event that takes place in that square, and how beautiful it was, and how it was non-religious, and it was every kind of person, and no one was saying, we need to light this candle or do that. It just was families, and it was really nice until last year. Like I said, there's a problem where none existed. We have a gigantic town, and for everyone to fight over that one spot is totally ridiculous. And for there even to be a committee to try to figure this out, are people not working together? Politics aside, politics will always be politics. There will always be two sides. This isn't that. This is, fighting over a piece of land, basically, basically trying to fix something that's not broken. No one has ever said anyone is not welcome in this community.
Yeah.
But we do not need to plaster signs all over town to prove that. It's shown by people's actions. need to get back to what respect really means. I'll end it there.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for your comments.
Can I jump in?
Oh, do we have any other?
It's non-public comment, but I just don't know what the protocol is, and I have to step out in 5 minutes to
okay.
jump to a different for a minute, and then I'll be back. So I just wanted to let you know. That's why I'll be exiting and then coming back in 10 or 15 minutes.
Thank you, Diane, for that. Any other public comments? Yes.
Sorry, Rob Stoll, 15 Grand Street.
Still.
I don't really have any comments as of now. My point actually, and I kind of agree with Paula on this, is that to have public comments right at the beginning, it's the first time I've been able to come to the meeting. I'd like to know a little more about what you've been talking about before I throw my 2 cents in. So that's
Right.
my public comment as of right now. Is there a chance later on in the meeting, after some discussion, that perhaps we'll have some input, or we could have some input?
Well, according to Robert's rules, public comments come first. And I understand that a lot of people have expressed disappointment in not being able to comment after hearing committee members or selectmen discuss. My suggestion would be, we're meeting again next week, and to come to the meeting next week and make your comments informed by what we discussed today.
And you
That
can
would
also
be-
submit correspondence ahead of time that would be read at the next
Absolutely.
meeting.
I follow you, I'm just having, I sit on the P and Z commission,
Yeah.
and our public comments are always at the very end of the meeting.
Right.
And the other town meetings that I've been to, it seems to me that all the public comments.
Well, I will say this as chair, we will take it under advisement. I think it's something that we can talk about.
Yeah.
You know, and,
Because most people stay for
Especially
the
the
whole,
last thing.
the whole meeting.
yeah,
If I, Madam Chair,
yes.
I'm going to participate as ex officio, just to provide some context for that. I don't believe it's actually listed in Robert's Rules, it is in the charter, but the legal framework for this type of a meeting, this is a business meeting that's held in public. It's not a public meeting for input. So our charter requires public input to be in any regular meeting. That's a charter, but it's not it isn't required anywhere else except the town of, it's usually customary. But we ran into this problem quite often on the Board of Ed, that when they were discussing a contentious issue, people would want to participate, but this is really a business meeting. Planning and zoning being an exception, due to the nature of their work, they put it at the end after, people, because they're hearing testimony from developers and residents. So that's a little bit of a different thing, but just to give you the historical framework of why it is that way, virtually every other board and commission is structured this way, where public comment is up front. There is a provision under certain conditions that the chair may allow very limited comment during testimony or during a discussion or debate about a topic, but it's rare that happens. Just so you have the context. Thank you.
For context, the last meeting previous to voting, is it against protocol to allow some public comment? Since there would be no future meeting for public comment?
Generally speaking, yeah. If I could just take another minute, I don't want to take you off your agenda. The general framework is when a committee, commission, or board is seated, it's, as was pointed out, its responsibility is to the entire town. It's structured this way because there's a danger of being too responsive to the individuals who come to offer suggestions and offer comments. It's not necessarily bad, but you have to remember that there's more people than are here. So the general framework is you allow public comment at the beginning, and then you conduct your business for better, for worse, however you want to vote. But it's usually not appropriate to allow comment during the debate. The times that the Board of Selectmen have allowed it and the Board of Finance is when we have department heads in here and we're talking about a budget issue that they might have valuable input on. But typically, that's the only time that I've seen that occur.
Makes sense. All right, so any other public comments?
When is the next meeting? You had mentioned there would be another.
Right, the next meeting will be Thursday, the 27th, at 6:30 here in Meeting Room A. Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean it's the last one. It depends on how far we get. That's why we didn't really say anything when, it was mentioned that we would try to wrap things up in June, because I think we know that we probably won't. So, but welcome, we're glad you're here.
So, any other, before I close it and move on to the next agenda item?
I do have a comment.
Yes.
And actually, I do have to leave. I don't mean to be rude. I prefer to stand up when I speak.
Yeah.
You just say your name and address, please?
Is this official record?
Yes.
Are you coming after me if I don't? My name is Donald Borsch Jr.
I'm sorry, what?
Donald Borsch Jr.
Could you spell your last name, please?
B-O-R-S-C-H.
And your address? And just say the street.
5 Minute Drive Extension.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm an outsider. I'm just catching bits and pieces of this thanks to online media, such and so forth. I remember when this happened. I remember the controversy, this, that, the other. The words were said this way, words were said that way. I'm outside going, okay, I see, I can see good people on both sides of this issue. However, I find it disingenuous that this would even be an issue, simply because when you walk into this building, it says, God bless America. When we started this meeting, we swore allegiance to a flag saying, one nation under God. Every president that we have ever had has taken the oath of office on the scriptures. Outside the box, this separation of church and state, which is from a letter to the Danbury Baptists from Thomas Jefferson in 1800, it is not in the Constitution.
Right.
Just outside the box. It's not in the Constitution. If you want to talk the Constitution, we can. If you want to talk a principle that has been ascribed to the Constitution, we can obviously do that as well. Separation of church and state, obviously, no one wants any government to establish a religion. My God, I am a covenant believer in Christ Jesus resurrected, but if the president said, by the way, we are now going to go full throttle, Jesus is Lord, Christian nation, I would, as a veteran, step up and say, Mr. President, you cannot do this. We are neither a Christian nation or a Muslim nation or whatever. We are not. That is why we are America. That is why we have laws. The display that we have on this public square, 40 years, such and so forth, it is a religious display. It's Jesus. Period. Let's just get down to it. It's celebrating the birth of Jesus, which some people do or do not believe in. That's fine. That's outstanding. If it comes down to a matter of you cannot have this on public property because it's taxpayer expense, me outside the box, not looking at this like a Christian, just looking at this as a citizen. If the argument is you cannot have any religious display because of taxpayer dollars, well then Mr. Knickerbocker, please remove that placard. Do not say the Pledge of Allegiance. And if you do, please omit under God. If there are any swearing-in ceremonies, I've not been to one in Bethel, I do not know, but if there's any kind of, I swear to do my job, so help me God, please never say that again. If we're going to have separation of church and state, ladies and gentlemen, Bethelites, then let's have separation of church and state. I find it peculiar, and as I said, disingenuous, that this display of something that matters to the majority is so horribly offensive. I don't believe that it is though an atheist will walk by or a Hindu or a Muslim will walk by this display and suddenly, oh, I'll have a come to Jesus moment. I just do not. I myself have walked by several mosques. I know friends that are Muslims that I served with over in the Sandbox. I never converted. It was never an issue. We had a job to do. So as a free citizen, I simply would put that out there. I have no desire to enter into any any argument.
Acceptable.
I have no desire to make this ugly or stupid or nonsensical or hateful. It's a religious display. It's a Jesus-centric display. if atheists or Muslims or whoever would wish also to use that ground, my gosh, why not? I surely, speaking for myself, am not threatened by the crescent moon and the star. I am not threatened by Shiva, the god of death, and I'm just not. If there's a portion of our community that is Muslim and they say, hey, we want to be represented, right on. If there's not, then why would, just for example, if there's not a huge Muslim contingency, then why would someone say, well, we need to have Muslims represented? Well, why? Are they demanding this of us? I'm trying to be pragmatic and practical. I'm trying to be disciplined and focused in these comments. I look forward to next week, or, I'm sorry,
Next week.
Next week.
thank you. But I do hope, if I've said anything that makes any sense, not hateful, not emotional, not looking to blame, not looking to jab anybody, my gosh, I have neither the stomach nor the time for that. But this is the town that I live in, the town I'm raising my daughters in. It's a tradition. It's been a tradition for several decades, from what I understand. It's not a right, it's a tradition. And if atheists or Muslims or whoever would like to join in, right on. Thank you very much, ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Thank you for your
For
comments.
your service.
Beth, do you want to say?
I thought you wanted to speak to me.
Oh, no, just asking, did you want to say anything?
So,
Under
so
public
that's
comment,
the,
no.
so that's the end of the public comment section. All right, so we'll move on in the agenda. The next order of business is correspondence. Have we received any
There's not.
correspondence?
No.
Okay, so the next order, no correspondence. The
Excuse me,
next,
Can I just say something? I raised my hand and you didn't acknowledge me.
because for during,
To cut you off, I realized there was one important point that
Yeah,
is
no.
very quick that I forgot to.
Paula, it's one comment, and
Yeah, but
and-
you cut me off, so I'd like to mention that the committee is not addressing a very important issue, which was something that came up at one of the meetings that addressed the religious displays last year, which is that one of the community members made an offer to put the nativity on private property aligning the P.T. Barnum Square. And this would solve everything, you wouldn't even need a committee. And I wanna know why.
Point of
that-
order,
Doesn't matter.
we're past public comment.
yeah, agreed.
It's an important issue though, and you're ignoring it.
I believe,
Do you want
So-
me or not?
Yes.
Okay, because I'll go home, this is something.
Can,
A little
can
contentious.
we add Beth in between the, or can do?
yes, this is a
Why don't
regular
we-
meeting, you can
Yeah, why
add
don't,
it.
why don't we add Beth in now so that she can answer questions that we have? So for the, I don't know if everybody on the committee knows, but if this is it Kavanaugh?
I'm
Kavanaugh?
Beth Cavagna.
Okay, if you could just introduce
tell you a
stuff and
little bit,
tell
sure.
the committee.
So let me, if you could make a motion to add, if you wanna actually add the item to the agenda, or if you want to include it into discussion of open area for display, which would work also, and then do correspondence at the end. But
Okay.
a motion needs to be made, why don't you just make that motion to
Okay.
move?
So I would like to make a motion to move the discussion of open areas for display as the next point on the agenda to be discussed. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so that being agreed on, Beth, if you could please enlighten the committee as to your purpose here tonight.
I think my purpose here is to, go ahead, did you want?
Introduce
Well,
yourself.
If I may, Madam Chair, I invited Beth to talk about the zoning regulations that are pertinent to use of the land over at P.T. Barnum Square and other parts of town.
Okay, I'm the planning director for the town of Bethel. I deal with zoning enforcement, zoning regulations, also permitting of signs and things of that nature that I think some of what you're discussing under this, on this committee. I hear a lot of discussion about, and I'm just gonna speak generally, discussion of displays. in regards to the nativity scene being a display, a temporary display on there. Over the years, I've had numerous situations where on private property, people have displayed items that other people have found offensive, such as large crosses, such as structures, art structures, things of that nature. And the zoning department has always used the Constitution as a reference guide that it is their right to display flags, to display crosses, to display anything that they choose to display on their property, under the zoning regulations of the town of Bethel.
Beth, you mean their own home?
And in your own home, on your own property. We've never interfered with any type of those matters. As far as I know, I've been doing this for about 20 years. As far as signs and things of that nature on public property, obviously in our zoning regulations, and I think you have a copy of it, election signs are not allowed on public property. Overall, we have a policy, not a regulation, that if the community wants to advertise community events within the town of Bethel, that's how you see those little push-up signs saying there's a supper here, a beer fest here, things like that. Again, it's a policy, it's not a regulation. If it's a community event, we have allowed them on town property. But the understanding is that you don't blast the town property with your signs. You can put them up 2 weeks before your event, but you take them down. And what we always do is warn everyone when you're doing this, you know, if you abuse the signage and throw it with 50 signs in the front lawn of the municipal center, then the policy will be revoked. And everybody seems to work very well with that. And it's for community events, events that are open to the public in the town of Bethel, not the Reggae Festival in Danbury, you know, other things like that. We do have regulations dealing with temporary banners. Okay, banners are prohibited within the town, with the exception of temporary banners. Temporary banners we consider, again, a grand opening of a store. They come in for permits to do that, okay? Allowing for a grand opening of a store, again, allowing for an event, beer festival. I think I'm always pulled down to the P.T. Barnum Square, where can we put the banner for the beer festival, things like that. Is that helpful to you?
These are temporary.
Yeah.
Temporary.
Is there any timetable on the temporary signs? So like say grand opening of a store?
We usually give them 30 days.
But for an event, it's 2 weeks before and then you take it down
And
generally?
then you take it down, and it's the little, it's the little 2x2
Yeah.
signs, you know, that you pull up. That's usually how we do it.
Okay, so that's town property and public, and the squares and the municipal property, all of that.
Since this event happened last year in regards to P.T. Barnum Square, I have been strictly hands-off with P.T. Barnum Square, because I just feel that until the town elders that is above me to make decisions as far as religious displays going on municipal property or any display on a town-owned property.
Madam Chair, question?
Are there, I do have a question, oh, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask
I'll
a couple questions.
recognize.
The holiday message that was displayed last Christmas as a banner, strictly speaking, would that violate the current policy that, or not?
I never even looked at it, Matt.
Okay.
I never saw it up close.
Well,
Sorry, I mean, I never, you know, I couldn't,
Well,
it was yellow.
it said, no, it said Happy Holidays, it was
Banner
about
sticking out of the
3 or
ground.
4
I
feet
truly-
wide.
6 or 8
If you had
feet
a
by 2
copy of
feet.
it, I would tell you, but I
Well,
don't.
the message being, you know, set aside the message, but a
Mhm.
banner that was up temporarily, had to go through your department ordinarily?
Yes,
Okay.
What about like Give Blood, one of those, where would that go?
That's
Community event.
community
Community
blood drives
event.
or community events, they put those temporary signs up when they do events.
I think at least for me, some confusion is you said that all banners are not allowed, but then some banners are allowed. Can you clarify that for me?
Sure, when
Thank
we
you.
say, let me just find Greg's.
It says it on the handout here.
I'm number 8, banner signs. Under prohibited signs,
So if I'm understanding that correctly, then they're all prohibited unless they have express permission from you. You being the
they're
planning and zoning.
prohibited unless they're for a temporary use permit or a special event permit. So if it's for a temporary use or a special event, then you can get a permit through the department. I am not going to be a judge of what banners are allowed and are not allowed.
Thank you.
Okay. Same with flags. Flags that recently became another point of, and flags, again, under the Constitution, I do not regulate flags. Period. If a flag is advertising, saying I have $3 hamburgers, out for a business or something like that, then yes, that's called an advertisement, and the zoning department would regulate that. But you can put any flag you want up anywhere, so I'm not regulating.
On private property.
Correct.
Beth, I know you gave us a list of signs,
Just
prohibited
some
signs.
information, you know,
Right.
just so you had something to, so you understood the difference between display and signs.
Yes, and I appreciate that very much. I don't know whether or not, you have the answer or would want to, answer my question, so I'll leave it to you. Are there any restrictions on displays on, like, some of the town property are little strips of property versus P.T. Barnum Square happens to be one of the bigger ones. There's also some property over by the schools that's bigger. Are there restrictions, like, can you put a banner 6 feet, if you got the, I guess, I don't have to ask this question because they'd have to come to you first to get the permission, but I'm just wondering, are there restrictions on putting things on town property, size versus height restrictions, width restrictions?
If they'd have to come through the permitting process.
Like that piece of property across from the Congregational Church?
Yes.
Would be something or other? Yeah, well, it's very small, so it
Small
would have to
island.
it would be small,
Again-
correspondingly small.
Right, and again, usually you see their, event signs, Food
Yeah.
Truck Friday, I think the VNA does a blood drive or something like that. And because we're in town, if a sign is obstructing traffic or sight lines and things like that, we deal with it, but outside of that, again, it's worked pretty well for community events. And I stress that.
Does planning and zoning have you in the past, been, advised or given an opinion as to the displays, during holiday season? Like the Crush, for instance, is big. So, did that require anything, any planning and zoning permissions? Like, our purpose is to make a recommendation to the first selectman as to a process for approving different holiday displays. And so we're number one, we have the issue of not a lot of property available, for displays, holiday signs or displays, and as well as size and timing and positioning on these various properties. So do you work with the Park and Rec or with the town clerk, wherever you go to get these permits?
What permits?
The permits to display a holiday display, to do a holiday display, that doesn't come through your office,
Well, the only holiday display that I know of is the Crash.
is the Crush.
Yeah.
Does that
We
come
did.
through your
It goes-
office?
I applied through Parks and Rec.
Park and Rec.
No,
Through Park and Rec,
it doesn't
so-
come
Parks
through
and
my
Rec.
office.
Okay. So that's not something that we have to worry about then? We would, deal with that through Park and
Well,
Rec.
my concern is that once you're dealing with a specific piece of property
Mhm.
and you're changing, you're talking about the rules pertaining to that property, I would prefer to be left out of that discussion because someone else is now taking control over what is going to be allowed and not allowed on that piece of property,
Okay,
because it's municipal property. I look at it, I don't look at there being a difference between parks
Mhm.
or, the town hall when I'm dealing with, displaying or enforcing our regulations. I look at it as one town property, yes, you can, no, you can't.
okay. I don't know, does anybody else on the committee have a question for Beth? Thank you so much for coming, Beth.
Thank you.
You've had a long day?
I'm sorry if I look tired.
I should have moved you up.
That's okay. But I'm available. If you have anything, you know where to get me. You
Yeah.
can always call.
Thank you,
Thanks,
thank you so much. All right, so, so now going back to the agenda, the next point of order is the consideration and approval of minutes from the special meeting of Thursday, June sixth, 2019.
If we move,
No.
if we move the discussion, should we continue?
Yeah,
You move the discussion point, Sue.
You
So
can
we
do
need to
that
finish that one
very end.
before we move on.
Oh, I just did it for Beth.
We
You mean,
moved it, but yeah, you moved
but
on,
we're gonna talk about open areas for displays? Okay,
because you moved it, that's all.
I moved it. Here's my inexperience as a new
Next time,
chair.
you can just
Next
insert
time I'll
it.
just.
You're doing fine.
You're
Okay.
getting here.
So.
You're not getting out of it.
Hello, committee. So first, why don't we start with, does anybody have any comments with respect to what Beth, the handouts that we received about the prohibited signs, the difference between displays versus signs, and then whatever questioning, whether I had a question or Matt had a question, I think we were the only two. Fran had a question too. So does anybody have any comments about that? Danielle?
Yeah, I just wanna clarify what she said and make sure that I got it and that we're
Okay.
all on the same
Same
page.
page.
So, and that you stepped out, but I believe she said she doesn't wanna have any involvement with making the final decisions on whether displays of any kind get approved for that property. So if she's not going to be a part of that, then we need to figure out or be told who would have the final say on those things.
Isn't it current policy,
Oh,
everything
Parks
goes
and
through
Rec,
Parks and
isn't
Rec now?
Okay, so
So
they would
that
be the
there
ones
already
that would
is a-
ultimately be
Yeah,
the
there already is a
decision.
process, at least for now,
Yeah.
if it doesn't
Oh, thank
change.
Yeah, and I was curious about that too, that's why I asked, like, is there going to, we obviously can't, I don't think, I would not wanna recommend anything that would go against planning and zoning regs and stuff. So I'm thinking that Park and Rec already probably has an idea about, you know,
Yeah.
what fits where and can probably make those decisions, assuming that we come to the conclusion and advise the selectmen to allow holiday displays, you know, and they choose to adopt our suggestions, so,
Is
Yeah.
Mr. Lawler, is Attorney Lawler going to join us tonight?
No, he has a conflict and he's unable to, but he did provide,
He's in college.
he did provide a memo based on the questions that this committee submitted.
Yeah, but this was from May 11th.
okay, so, let's go back, so,
This was before we had our meetings, right? Oh,
Okay.
wait a minute, that's
I
right.
don't know why
Okay.
that was at May 11th, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe
Oh, we
he,
had,
is this the one that he sent you
Mhm.
today?
oh, this was after then, our second meeting was 4:25. So this was after the second meeting,
This wasn't after the last meeting.
not the last meeting.
okay, so, open areas for displays. So, does anybody wanna start the discussion about the open areas for display?
I mean, we kind of had already discussed that the two other areas were kind of out of the
Yeah,
question
too small.
because they are
Right.
too small and they would, I really think that it's just a traffic, like, it's like a safety issue because you can't really see anything coming if you were driving around that
Mhm.
triangle, kind of by the food bag, it's just too small, I don't.
Or if they are left as an option, I think we have to restrict the size specifically for those. We couldn't say one size for all the spots, because it's not
Right.
practical.
Yeah.
So in spots of under a certain size, you can have 2x2 signs like Beth said, but maybe you can't have a creche.
Right.
Or a 5x5 banner,
Right.
or whatever it might be.
has everybody on the committee had an opportunity to read Attorney Lawler's memo regarding, his responses or his suggestions, his take on the questions that we submitted? Has everybody had an opportunity to? All right, and I wanna say for the record, I think all of us, most of us, and if you haven't heard, the United States Supreme Court did today issue a decision that overrides the Lemon Test. We talked about the prongs of the Lemon Test and how you kind of figure out whether or not a religious display violates the Establishment Clause, which is the separation of church and state clause. So I'm thinking that having read Attorney Lawler's comments, a lot of his comments are based on that Lemon Test, because he probably, as I had no idea, a decision was close to coming down.
Today.
And it was rendered today, but I had no idea until they don't tell you what's going to be decided or what they're going to do. So now we have a new law of the land, and I did take an opportunity to print it out and read it today and all of the different concurring opinions. But the name of it is the American Legion Petitioners versus American Humanist Association. And a companion case, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission versus the American Humanist Association. So,
Ollie, do you want me to make copies of that?
I did not print it's a 87-page opinion. So I did not print the entire
Footnotes.
opinion. What I did was,
I think, I'm sorry.
go ahead, no, well, I just wanted to say, for my own edification, not for passing out or schooling anybody on the new law of the land, which I'm still not completely sure, having not read and digested the whole 87 pages. However, I am an attorney, and scanning it with my knowledge, my legal knowledge, I did come to the conclusion, it is my opinion, that this new case does overturn Lemon versus Kurtzman. So, and this is now the new law of the land with respect to the Establishment Clause, which is the separation of church and state. So, I found it serendipitous that this case came down today, because it can help inform us moving forward. But until we really have an opportunity to fully understand it,
And I would question whether we can, and I don't know, so I would question whether we can apply law that was formulated for a permanent structure to temporary displays during a season. And I don't know, I'm not an attorney, but.
Yeah, no, I mean, while the case centered on a permanent structure, the decision by the court addressed issues of holiday displays. So it might be helpful to ask Attorney Lawler to comment in light of the new Supreme Court case, because I think the whole purpose of this committee was to put together a suggestion to the selectmen to ease the minds, I think, of the government officials as well as citizens about whether or not what we're doing is in violation of law, whether it's state law, town law, national law, federal law. So everybody's worried about. We talked about lawsuits. We talked about people making challenges to displays and other things. And basically, any challenge that would be made at the lowest of level would have to comply with the new law of the land.
So in your understanding of it, since you've read 87 pages of it?
No, I didn't read the entire. What I did was, in law school, they train us I skip a lot of the facts that aren't relevant and get right to what is their holding. The holding is, this is why we decided.
Give us
this.
a synopsis.
Can I finish my question?
No, yes.
So my question about it would be, now I've lost my train of thought, sorry. It was, so occupying space. So our concerns from a legal standpoint before were not necessarily whether it's lawful to have that there. I don't think anybody was questioning whether it's lawful to have,
Right.
if they were, that wasn't my take on it.
Okay.
But more questioning whether it's lawful for that to solely occupy that space.
Right.
without inviting the opportunity for other people to display there. So did it address anything like that?
I think it did, because there were lots of, and the justices, while it was a 7-2 decision, so 7 joined in the decision and 2 dissented completely. Of the 7 justices, there were 4 that decided that they wanted to add their own additional opinions, so they're called concurring opinions, saying, we agree with the majority, but for maybe this different reason, you know, and, or I'd like to also elaborate on a certain point that the court made. It was Justice Alito that gave the ruling. So there was some discussion about reasoning why something should be allowed in the same place, whether it's permanent or, and I think it would naturally flow, to answer your question, I think the reasons that they found it was okay for this cross to stay permanently and not be removed can reasonably translate to a permanent structure every year being put up, like the menorah on the national, on our national lands down in DC. So, and those reasons were tradition, history, what else? I can't remember which justice.
They said, take, can I add something?
Wait, I'll finish, and then if you, Fran, if you have something too. Because I don't want to misquote anybody, and I wanted to find the one justice that said it, and I think it helps us. Yeah, so many justices. And of course, I can't find it at this moment, and I'm sorry, and maybe for next week I'll do it, but it was basically history and tradition, was the main reason, that they had found that, the crosses weren't just, while it's obvious that a cross is a religious symbol of Christianity, it wasn't just, it no longer, it's not just a religious symbol anymore. It's also, what other symbols, it symbolizes other things like freedom, sacrifice.
But the cross specifically.
Right, the cross, in this particular case. And they talk about the history and the traditions of that. So I think that would translate to a temporary, same place every year, if that's the direction that this committee would go, or that the select would even go, even if we made that suggestion. I don't know.
I'm not sure that I agree that a cross is the same thing as a crush, but I respect what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I think the argument for the creche would be tradition, community event for this particular creche, you know, that it's not come find Jesus, but more it's built around a community event and, you know, ceremony and Santa coming to town and all that stuff. So anyway, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so.
Madam Chair, if I might,
Yes.
I had Dion pass out something. When I looked at what you were provided tonight, I think Marty attached the wrong memo from his computer by mistake, because this was something that was
Okay.
written months ago, I think, for the board of selectmen.
Oh, okay.
So I copied and pasted
Oh, my God.
his,
Oh.
so what you were just handed was his answers to, you know, to the direct questions from the last one.
Oh,
So
thank you.
apologies for the mistake on that.
Okay, so we all just got, can we take a moment to review it?
Thank you for getting this.
I know, because it didn't compute. Well, apparently he did want you to see the previous memo that he wrote, so he attached that. We
Value
assumed
there
that they
too,
were the
just
same.
this is answering our questions, and the other was just like,
Yeah.
comment, so that's great.
All right, so,
Now we have a new conversation.
right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Okay, so, having read it, would anybody like to make a comment, having read Attorney Lawler's newest memo? Anybody?
Well, it sounds like we can stop talking about certain things that we've been discussing, and that we need to start talking about things that we've been not discussing.
I come to the same conclusion from that, you know, it's really up to us.
To make recommendations.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so who wants to start?
I'll-
Mary.
I consider myself pretty neutral on this, I really honestly do. I appreciate the crush for where it is, I can see why some people want it moved, and I appreciate that. I can see why some people want it to stay, and I appreciate that as well.
Listen.
I do think that a lottery would be useful going forward, and splitting the space up equally, and it's a first come, first served basis. Whoever gets there first, you know, it is what it is. As you said before, life is not fair. I mean, it's how it is, but I think to be fair, and I mean, Attorney Lawler noted in here that land is for everyone to use.
But we also talked about safety and size.
What was the safety concern though?
The
Because
safety
honestly,
concern-
Fran, no, wait, I'm not done. When I drove by P.T. Barnum Square, I didn't see any problems with having a creche and a sign there. What was the safety
No,
concern?
that's fine, but I don't think we could move the creche.
I didn't ask you to move the creche. I
Oh.
said keeping it there, fine, but splitting the land.
Oh,
Can I-
sure,
can I
sure.
just- can I
That's
just
not a
say-
problem. I
No,
don't think
no,
that's a
I-
problem.
think-
Moving forward though, can we be a little, listen, it's a heated discussion and stuff, but we're all trying to do the best we can based on, you know, our feelings. And so I just don't wanna see it to getting like acrimonious or getting contentious back and forth. And I certainly don't think it should devolve into you know, like a tennis match.
Let somebody
So let's like, you know, if you have a comment, I'm gonna ask for a comment. If you could just let me know you have a comment, I'll recognize you and we'll let you finish, and then if somebody else on the committee wants to make a response, we'll do that, okay? So I'm gonna go back to Mary, okay? And so if you could just, if you could restate briefly, what was your position, and then if anybody wants to comment on it, we'll go there.
I really felt like it was handled pretty well last year. I
Okay.
can appreciate both the displays or another display if someone got there first. I really, that is how I feel. I feel like splitting it up is kind of a logical thing to do, and it should be on a first come, first served basis. And we should have, like we discussed, a time, you know, maybe it's September 1st for people to apply for the space, you know, for the winter holidays, and then go from there.
Okay. Yes, Diane.
I mean, then that brings up the question in my mind of what happens when two people show up at 8 o'clock in the morning with their application at the door at the same time, and how that is handled, in terms of lottery, like picking out of a hat versus like first come, first serve. I think that we would have to clarify the difference between those two.
That's okay.
And Fran?
Yeah, can we at least agree that the creche stays there? And that, we put other displays on the town square according to, you know, room and size and safety? But we did talk about, that it was kind of difficult to move something like the creche to a smaller piece of property. Because it involves heavy pieces and a stable and animals and hay and also there's the winter festival, and you have people there. Sometimes you have 150 people there, and where are they gonna stand, in the street? So we need a spot where we can put the creche. And I believe you said, Tim, it's on like a truck or something, on a
It's on a
flatbed
trailer.
truck? A trailer, and so we need room for, you know, people to stand there and, for the 3-day, winter festival. So I have no problem with sharing the space. But I believe we did say that we felt, based on tradition, which is precedent, and based on size and safety, that the crash should stay there. And then, based on first come, first serve, we would have other groups on the town square. And I wanted to vote on this, and I think we said we couldn't vote on this last week, just as a recommendation.
Right, I don't think we're ready to vote
Can
yet.
we make all our recommendations at once?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Daniel.
No, after, but.
So I don't think that we agreed on that. I think that some members of the committee agree with
Well,
that.
we
and other
talked about
members-
it.
Excuse me, and other members of the committee don't agree with that. I would be a person that doesn't agree with that. I think if we have 5 applications, they should all be considered equally, and there'll need to be some sort of an arrangement on how we decide which of those 3 are, but we don't give priority to one over the other, because I think that opens up a whole bag of worms. So that's one issue that I personally have with that. I also think that it's still, this has been my soapbox from the beginning. I still think we really need to think about the fact that there may be offensive displays, not offensive to everybody, offensive to some. And if we're not able to censor speech for anybody, and we're not able to say this is okay and this is not okay, I'm not talking about nudity or lewd thing, I'm talking about representations of different viewpoints that people don't agree with and don't care for. That if we're gonna open up, if we're gonna have one
Then
thing,
we'll have to.
we can have many things. I hear you, Tim, I look at how acrimonious the
I'm
town
sorry,
has
what
been
did
over.
you say?
Then we
He
would
said
have to.
they'll
I mean, I think that was pretty clear in the laws that it was either all or nothing, right?
So my
And I think
concern
the
is.
majority of us understand that that's not.
So that's my concern, that's what I'm stating, is that my feeling as a member of this town and as a member of this community is that there are a large number of people in this community that will not be tolerant of other things, and so that is my concern with having multiple displays there. That's my concern.
I think I'd like to get to the point where there's a lot we do agree on, I think, and there's some big sticking parts.
Right.
But what are we gonna be voting on? So even almost just a list of the different things, I think the first thing is, should we have it or not have it? If the group agrees we have it, kind of then it trees out, right? Then where are things gonna go? What size are things gonna be? How are we gonna allocate space? I absolutely agree, if 2 of us show up, because if at 9 AM on September 1st is the day, we're gonna be 2 people there at 8:59.
Well,
So then do you say, okay, is it a system? I think, I'm still gonna stick, and everybody knows my view is, you know, I don't want to see things move every year. I think if there's a menorah this year, which there is serious talk about a menorah going up this year, whatever spot it goes, that's where people should know the menorah is, and that's
Yeah.
where people know that it's just, it's odd to go, where did they put the creche this year?
Yeah.
Like, is
No,
it,
I
where did they put the menorah this year? Where did they put the holiday sign this year? Where did they,
Are
You
you
know-
talking about on that one little piece of property?
no, just wherever it ends up, you know,
I
but
thought we
once,
were only talking
but
about
once
one.
something, no, just in general, once something is in a spot, you know, and I know there's gonna be different dissenting points on this, but I think some kind of preference goes to that until they release or defer to that spot, whatever the thing is. If the menorah goes in spot 2 this year because they apply and nobody else applies, for that spot, then next year, if they wanna put it up again,
Yeah.
you know, first pick, first dibs, whatever the policy is. I haven't read anything, and maybe somebody disagrees, that says, as long as you have a policy and apply it consistently, that's a problem, right? Now, the only thing would be a limiting amount of spots, and I understand that if we were to get an overwhelming amount of applications, we're gonna have to cross that point if that ever happens. But other than that's just from a practical point of view, to not have, okay, let's all get together on September 1st and draw from a hat to figure out what's going where. It doesn't work for me. That doesn't
I'm
jive
gonna
for me.
raise my hand and call on myself.
Good.
I
Recognize you.
thank you very much. I would like to say that, first of all, I think it's not practical to, in my opinion, to do equal access, equal time, because not all displays, banners, signs are equal, okay? It would not make sense to me, and not because, listen, I'm trying to be very open-minded about this. I support both sides, and, you know, I'd like to think that as a community, we could come together, and not everybody, the the sign of a successful mediation is that everybody walks away thinking they lost, okay? Everybody's angry about it, and so I'd like to see that happen here. My opinion about the equal time, equal access is that there aren't equal, and it would be nonsensical to me if this is our biggest piece of property, and we have two people that show up at the same time for access to this property, and one wants to put a display this size, and one wants to put a display this size. It would make absolutely no sense to me if this person by lottery won and said, I want to go here, right in the middle of it. And then the big display is like, oh, I can't really go anywhere because now I'm too close to the road. Now I'm, away from, that doesn't make sense. I think as a community.
That wasn't what I was saying.
No, I understand. The whole point of equal opportunity in lottery presents that, like, hey, I get first pick, and so I'm gonna pick here, and I think that would just, the spirit of what we're supposed to do, that would violate the spirit of it. I want to see anybody, any religious organization, any non-religious organization, any holiday display, I want everybody to have an opportunity to put it where people will see it. And I think we're limited in that, so we really have to kind of think about putting together a recommendation to the selectmen that helps frame their, where things go. And the second point, I wrote down everybody's point. There was another point that was made with respect to things that might be offensive to different viewpoints, and I'm sensitive to that because there are lots of viewpoints that I'm offended by, okay? And I can choose to speak out about it, voice my offense and, my position about it, and hopefully not get attacked. Social media is not a good place to do that, by the way. But I would like to be able to do that. I also have the option of turning and not looking, and I don't want to use any of the displays as my example. I'm walking in the mall and I'm seeing young girls with shorts that their buttocks are showing. Okay, I find that incredibly offensive, but they have the right to do it. So the way that I treat it is I look away. I might do a little tisk. I don't school them on it, and I just keep walking, and I thank God that my daughter doesn't wear shorts like that. She does other things that I find offensive, but that's not one of them. So with respect to offense, and I think that the law does also support that viewpoint that, your personal viewpoints where you may be offended by something are not actionable. You can't bring a lawsuit if you're personally offended by something. You actually have to show that you're injured by it, and a personal injury of offense is not recognized, in the law. So that's my thing. It's like walk away, look away. The last thing was deference to something that's been there before. I also find that to be a compelling reason, and not because it ends up being in favor of the creche, but I do find that tradition and something that has historically been there and is easily recognizable is a compelling reason to continue a tradition and a history, especially when a community event is kind of planned around it. So I find that to be compelling. It doesn't mean that you can't start a new tradition if this committee decides to, but I think with the creche, honestly, Tim, we have to find a place for it, where that place may be. Yeah. And I think that moving forward, wherever that place may be, whether it's on P.T. Barnum Square or it's moved to another space, I think given the need for power, the size, I think it's very limited, and you have to put it somewhere. And people look forward to, they enjoy, going to places. And I lived in Russia for 6 months. I'll end this very quickly. I lived in Russia, and their grocery stores are like kiosks. They're boxes. And I would go into Gostiny Dvor, which in St. Petersburg is the biggest marketplace. And so I'd buy toilet paper on the 3rd level, you know, and I got so excited, I'd go like a week later, and I'd go back to that 3rd level because I need toilet paper, and the toilet paper wasn't there.
Different spot.
It was on the 7th floor of the place, and it changed like that all the time. And so I can relate to the whole idea of it's a tradition and you always go back to the same place. I know where Caroluzzi's is, I know where, and you know, these aren't permanent structures, but that's my point. That's my opinion. Thank
Can I
you.
add to that? And I'll be short
Yes.
if you don't mind. And I would say, in the absence of a better policy, like if 2 people show up at the same time, you do have to have a point of differentiation. I haven't heard a better suggestion, other than we're just gonna randomly pick. Well, you know, in absence of a better policy, I think it makes sense until somebody kind of releases that spot, whatever. I also don't know if that's necessarily the most prominent spot. I mean, I would argue that the holiday sign was closer to the street, had definitely better car visibility, had, you know, we're behind the Doughboy if you're standing in, you know, on the sidewalk. It's where it's always been, maybe that's why it's the coveted spot, but I don't know, you know, if nothing had ever been there and somebody said pick the most visible spot on the square, if that's the spot that would be picked, other than possibly for the celebration when everybody's there for the tree lighting, with attention being focused there. The rest of the time, just for visibility of passing traffic and passing pedestrians, I would argue there's more visible spots. So other than a mean-spirited, let's see if we can't move what's always been there for the sake of doing it, it baffles me a little bit that it's as big of a problem as it is. And again, that's my personal opinion, everyone's entitled to their own, but it kind of feels like that's what it is to me. And, you know, I'm all for inclusion, but inclusion trying to bring yourself, or bringing your views in by trying to push others to the side or to a lesser spot, it just, again, seems mean-spirited. It doesn't seem like the intent of, I think, anybody here, and hopefully not the intent of the town. And that's, you know, that's kind of my position. I'll close it there.
Fran had your hand up, but you put it down.
No, I've just deferred to Tim.
Okay, so I'll call on you next.
Thank you.
And then I'll come to you.
I think we have to make a distinction between offensive and something we just don't agree with. Now, if I see something and I don't agree with it, fine, you agree with it, that's your right. But if something is offensive, now we'd have to, you know, talk about why it's offensive, but I can point to, I think it was the Brooklyn Museum years ago. They had a picture of the Virgin Mary and there was crap all over it. And that was, you know, people thought it was great and a lot of people thought it was terrible. That would be offensive. But something just stating, you know, principles, something you believe in, I would have no problem with, and I'm sure other people would not. Now, there was a sign in Monroe that we were told to look at, or not look at, but it was online, and it was something like, you know, you stupid people or something, why do you believe in myths, grow up, or something to that effect. And I'm just paraphrasing here, I remember being kind of insulted. Something like that, I think, would be considered offensive. But something just stating what you believe, you know, I think that, and the word, again, would be reasonable, that we would look at that and say, that's reasonably offensive, or that's reasonably not offensive.
How would I ask Diana? I think my statement is being misconstrued repeatedly, so I asked if it was okay with her if I just went ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm not concerned about my own level of offense, and I wasn't talking about the level of offense of members of this committee. I was talking about the level of offense of the community.
Yes, me too, that's what I'm talking about.
And the reason that I am saying that is based on the meetings that we had and based on the interactions that I have had. I had people just this week saying that having a banner from the atheists there is, I can't remember the exact words, so I'm gonna paraphrase, but that it's offensive, that it's belittling, that the banner that was there was mocking, or, is that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Mocking the Christians, mocking the creche, just by its existence because it was posted there from the atheists. So again, this isn't about me. People in the community hold the belief vocally, loudly, that just being an atheist is mocking. So I'm presenting that I don't know that our community is quite as ready to accept beliefs from others as perhaps this very enlightened committee might be. That was what I was saying, I just
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
clarify my statement, because I don't think that was coming across clearly.
Can I just add something, Holly?
Yes.
I mean, what goes on social media is one thing, and people get very, very hysterical, and they say a lot of things maybe they wouldn't say, and yet what would pass for reasonable in a community, I think, are two different things. People go kind of crazy on social
It's
media.
actually referring to just the meetings that we had as well, so not just social media, but.
Diane, did you want to add
No,
anything?
I had a question about, the tree lighting event, and I have never attended, so I was curious, the placement of the creche is right next to the tree that's lit, that's the focal point for this community event.
The tree is lit, Santa's there, off to the side, you know.
But would it be correct that people gather around
People
that
gather around
one
the
Yes.
tree.
area?
You gather all around the square.
Right, the
Actually,
tree.
the
I
whole
didn't know
one
if it was
side, if I'm right, the whole
Yeah.
one side, the Famous Pizza side is all shut down. So they're up and down that side. The other side is left open for the fire truck to come through. So Santa's on that side. That's the focal point when Santa's there, when the tree's lit. Tree's the focal point, you know, the carols off to the side are the focal point. Yes, the crush is there. And if it was last year, had the sign been, the sign would have been there too. I think it came after the event last year, but the focal point, I don't think is meant to be the crush, but the crush is there.
Honestly, it's a
The
must.
focal point of the tree lighting is the tree. I mean,
Yeah.
but then there
The
is,
tree is next to
but
the
there is,
creche.
well,
The
Is that-
creche is like in
Most
front of
people
the tree, if I
kinda go for
remember
Santa
correctly.
The creche is in front of the tree.
the crush is in front of the
Tree, the
power
crash, and then like the little tables and chairs, which might get moved for that event, but where they normally sit, and then the frontage.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I could add,
Yes.
there has been talk in Town Hall and with the Board of Selectmen and with the Chamber of Commerce of moving a holiday tree, Christmas tree, whatever you wanna call it, to the lawn of Town Hall over by the gazebo and holding the tree lighting there for safety reasons, because there's a lot of people crowded in there and
Yeah.
the fire truck has to get through, and there's some concern over safety. That hasn't been decided, but
It's not a
the
bad
tree
idea.
lighting could possibly move and not be on that green in the future.
That's
It's under
In
consideration.
which case, I'd still be comfortable with the crush staying right where it is. I don't tie the two together, I do think it's there, because it's the holiday season, but I don't think it's a crush viewing party, it's clearly I mean, it's Santa, it's Christmas tree, it's the day after Thanksgiving.
Right. And I just, before, and I'm gonna recognize you, Fran, I wanted to add that I'm not convinced that, whether it's new groups or even the atheist group, okay, are gonna keep the same, like the banner that's there. Who knows if that's gonna be the display that they choose, you know? We have no
Right.
idea.
And I think-
So that's why I think that this committee, we have to just anticipate that there are gonna be different kinds of things. Yes, Fran?
I was gonna say, last year during the winter festival, there was there was s'mores. We're making s'mores, there was a fire, there was soup. There was a lot of activity on that square. And so unless it's moved, you know, I mean, it was comfortable there. I mean, there were a lot of people, but there was enough room for the s'mores and the soup and the hot chocolate. That was also there for about maybe 4 or 5 hours. So that's all part of it, you know. I can't imagine that being anyplace else.
It might be.
Well, unless it's a safety
It
issue,
might
if
be.
it's a safety issue, that's different.
Yeah.
So I wanna clarify a bit, my question was asked because I think from my perspective, it's not so much about it's not at all actually about my personal beliefs or any level of offensiveness, but my, interest in wanting to promote diversity and inclusion for the community. And I
Yeah.
think that, you know, from what I know, we can indirectly send a message that a group has a certain priority over others by way of placement and town events. And so changing the event to another location where there is less of an emphasis on what is on the green, I think, could minimize that. But I also think that we could be excluding a lot of people by keeping positioning, having it be a rule that the majority continues to have a place, a special place where the town event is held. I think that.
Would you feel differently if the holiday display that you guys put up was in the same spot?
And I don't wanna,
But
everyone
if-
keeps pointing to me.
Well, if
and
whatever,
I've
well,
never
that's,
once
for
voiced my
the
own
purpose of examples only, it's the only other display that was up. So, if that display was in the same place every year, if the policy is applied across whatever, right? So, again, just as prominent a display, just as visible if you have a PT Barnum Square event, by all means, and if the event is moved, then just as visible by passing traffic, if not more visible. I think if there was a policy, it would be applied the same way. If every year by a certain cutoff, an application came in for that spot, then that would be that spot, and there's other spots of a new application. So I don't think I'm saying just the crush needs to be in that spot and everybody else is random. I think it's across the board, if it's a policy, it would be a policy for any previous spot. And again, just so it's not moving all around.
When you say all around, I'm so confused. Do you mean all
So the
around
crush is
on
gonna
that?
be here, then the crush is gonna be, yeah, in the front corner, and then we're gonna run an extension cord over, and.
It's not a big piece of property though.
Right, so just keep it in one spot, there's really not a prioritized,
It wasn't,
there's not a prioritized segment that 5 feet over here or 15 feet over there is more special.
I just don't think people are getting losing on
I
the
think the
square.
purpose
It's
is
a
to
tiny
move
one.
I think the purpose is to move the crush.
I
That's my
hear that you're
opinion.
saying that, but that's actually not my intention at all. Where my heart is that if something is given a priority placement that supersedes anybody else's opportunity to have that spot, then that's,
What makes it a priority?
that you're saying, the creche can only be here and no one else can have that place. I think what you were about to ask Diana, which I should let her answer, but was whether she would care if they said the banner couldn't have the same spot every year. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that we're on the same page and then say I wouldn't care less if the banner had to move every single year.
the banner is
Difference of
easily
opinion.
movable.
So is the creche, it's on a trailer.
No, it isn't.
Okay,
Let's
we
say
this is what we talked about not doing, right? Yes, all happiness, rainbows and hearts. Yes,
they're gonna-
Diane. Is it Diane or Diana?
Diana,
Okay, I apologize. So go ahead, Diana.
I'm
Okay.
right now.
Mary.
So
No,
I
it's okay.
just wanted to clarify my position before. So say if, because of history, tradition, the creche were to stay there, and then the rest of whatever space in PT Barnum Square was kind of left up for grabs. I don't know if that is a potential solution that could help. My next comment was about the things that offend people, and I thought that the Board of Selectmen had addressed that in the very first meeting back in December, that it was anything that was like blatantly offensive, very rude, that was not allowed, but say if, the hand with the surgeon was going around it, if that was something that someone was interested in putting up, they could put it up and nothing could be said about it because that is the law of the land.
Right.
But then my next question for Tim, and I kind of tried to ask about it last time we were here too. So is the creche fixed to the trailer? It's literally nailed to the bottom of
One
the trailer?
permit, yeah, you wouldn't be able to pull it, the thing would fall off of it. We take it to Shepherd's where it is stored, we jack it up and take the tires off of it so the tires don't rot, but the rest of it is all one piece.
So
Statues and all, statues are bolted down,
I'm just
so
playing like
for lack of
devil's
theft.
advocate on both sides. So say if, the Board of Selectmen decided that this PT Barnum Square, we're not gonna have anything here. I drove by the church that had been asked about, and to me, it didn't really look like the wall was that high, and I was thinking to myself, say if you were to take the wheels off the trailer like you just said and put it on some PVC pipe and just roll it back, it looks like the space is big enough and the
It
church
wouldn't go.
had.
So a couple issues. One, I guess that speaks to the entire issue of just relegating everything to church property versus private. So in the event that, we decide that nothing is gonna go on public land, then yeah, we're back to looking for alternatives, I guess, and I don't know what the alternative would be. That space is a problem for our particular nativity set. If they had a different nativity set that was, say the old one that we replaced came apart and went together every year, which posed a whole different set of problems, then yes, it could go there. We had a hard time getting it up the curb there. A truck went up, pulled it up, we disconnected it and drove back down the other side.
Okay.
Took the power of a truck to pull it up ramps to go up the curb. It's not something we're putting on PVC pipe and lifting, even, we were worried if the weight of it was gonna work on the trailer. So it's
Okay.
not, You know, it's a solid, those are timbers, I mean, they were shaved off of trees, the bark.
'Cause I saw it last year, I didn't know how
Each
it was
board is probably
constructed.
40 pounds and it's constructed completely of wood. It's
Okay.
tons, not
So it's
pounds.
not like,
That's why it's fixed to a trailer, because it wasn't, breaking it down and putting it together was a problem with the old set. In the middle of January, frozen to the ground, wasn't always fun. But in addition to that, because of the weight of it, it doesn't make sense to take it off the trailer. It would literally take equipment to lift it before. So it's permanently a part of it. And then the statues are also permanently affixed inside because we had an issue with somebody stealing, you know, some of the statues in the past, so they would have a hard time doing it, yeah. They would literally have to break it in order to get it out to this point. So it is one piece.
okay, no, I was just curious to see if that, so, and I know that last year, the guy who owns Famous Pizza, he had offered if, you know, everything, he had offered
There's-
to put it on his piece of property.
I can't tell you how many private locations of prominence were offered last year. Mr. NSX was one of them, who said, if you don't want it on the square there, take my fence down, put it on my front lawn, put a floodlight on it. He didn't, you know, but that was a lot of passionate speech came out last year also, so, and that to me is, you know, that's again, still public versus private land. We received dozens, I mean, it would be no exaggeration to say dozens of prominent private locations requested, but that wasn't the point of it. The point of it was that, you know, we have a tradition here that dates, you know, back to some of us for kids, or not even here, that, you know, a lot of people value. I can't tell you the countless stories I got engaged in front of that. We take our family holiday photo for the last, you know, I have photos of grandma that's not with us anymore from the 80s, you know, in front of that. I can't imagine it not being there. It's not just religion. There are people that clearly are, that were not religious. At our dedication ceremony, we had people of non-Christian denomination that came out in support of just the tradition and the culture of it being there.
Right.
And it was not religious. For some people, it's religious. And
No,
for some
I-
people, it's not religious. And for some people that are offended, you know, to the point of, you know, look up, look away, that offense is not the intent of it being there.
Right.
And I understand that some people may be, and I may be offended by things too that I, you know, I look the other way. You know, we all live together.
Yes, Daniel.
So to speak to the prioritization of spots that
I
we
still don't look at it as prioritization, but okay.
Okay, I don't know what words you would choose to use, that's what comes to my mind. Reserving of spots, how would you phrase it? I'm happy to
Just
use
the-
your language.
Necessity.
Well, necessity would be part of it, but even just the precedent, the
Okay, precedent,
pragmatic.
great, we'll go with precedent. So in terms of the precedent that you speak to and your concerns about that, Marty clearly laid this out for us right here in the document, and it says, right there, that that's not on page 2.
Yeah,
In the
to his
paragraph that
knowledge,
starts, to my knowledge.
that there is no decision, and it would be a matter of the committee, in his
Right, but
opinion.
no, it says the use of town property should be decided on first and foremost on the basis of fairness to all of the parties. So that is what my concern is. It is not pettiness and it is not spite. It is about offering equal opportunities to any groups, not my group, not your group, any groups that wish to display things on the lawn. And it looks like that's what he's telling us is an important factor for us to consider in our committee.
Can I?
No matter how long it's been
I
in
would-
existence,
but I would
that
say
it
it
doesn't
goes-
get priority
It
over
would
other
also go on to
displays.
say that it is something that the committee was to discuss and recommend a procedure, because there is logistical issues. It's not as simple as, let's just all be fair. You know, there is some logistical issues, and ultimately, it does go on to basically say, there is no court decision, and it's up to the committee, that's why we're here. There's not a black and white answer to all this, or I think a lot of us wouldn't be here.
We wouldn't be here for it.
And there's different views as to, you know, definition of, I guess, fairness versus inclusion. You know, there's exclusion by inclusion, where the minority is given so much that the majority is actually then relegated in favor of an abundance of caution to the minority too. So, we all have our different views. I don't think any of that's gonna change, and at some point, we're gonna vote on this.
I think it's
And that's what
important
it's
as
gonna come down
neighbors for
to.
you and I, for you to at least hear what I'm telling you.
I agree. That's why I'm here.
I agree.
That I am not looking to, it's not a personal vendetta, and it's not about move the creche. I'm really here for the sole purpose of trying to be a part of making this a fair process, and to make sure that many different viewpoints have the opportunity to be represented. That's all.
Okay.
will be.
I would like to comment, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring here. With respect to, let's keep in mind that with respect to town property, not all town property is created equal, okay? So the importance of a placement on the municipal lawn, right in front of, right on the front lawn, versus on P.T. Barnum Square is a completely different animal. And so there is not P.T. Barnum Square and Liberty Square or Libby Square, those properties, and the McCower Park suggestion, and maybe down in front of the schools, those properties don't hold the constitutional muster that putting a creche or a cross or a menorah on the town building, square, the municipal building, lawn. So we have to keep that in mind, that when we're talking about equality or fairness, it's not about that particular piece of property, because we're not talking about the elephant in the room property in front of the municipal. That's off guards, okay? So it's just regular town property that we're doing. And in terms of fairness and representation, and I agree with you, Diana, I think that there is an interest, not just by the minority, but by all of us, that we create more diversity in our town. I sent my daughter to a school that was more diverse in Fairfield because I felt like I wanted her exposed to that. So I was hoping that at the last meeting you had mentioned, you had asked if there was a diversity committee or council, and I think we found out there wasn't, and I would encourage you to maybe start trying to put one together to get that going. So I'd like to say that, but with respect to, do I think that if a particular group doesn't get P.T. Barnum Square but gets Libby Square, if it were an ideal situation for them, or if it worked for them, I think that that's diversity enough. I think that that's representative. I don't think representation has to be equal and exact. I think it just has to be, there has to be representation. So in my opinion, to say, well, if the creche gets that, I want to have that too, and that's what it's supposed to be because that's the only fair thing. It's not the only fair thing. That's, in my opinion, that's, yes, Diana.
So sometimes I think that, and this is just my perception, I
Yeah.
think when we talk about fairness in this room, it's, like, these aren't issues around, like, Famous Pizza is giving out the, first 50 people who come get a free slice. Oh, well, I didn't get one, I'm gonna cry about it. Yes,
Yeah.
life isn't fair. Like, the religious and spiritual and racial and cultural aspects are part of people's identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we're talking about fairness, someone saying, I deserve as much of a right to be in this space as you because it's representative of who I am,
Mhm.
for me, is what I want people to be able to speak up about and have a fair say in, not, well, too bad, like, they ran out of pizza, too bad, this is how it's always been. I personally don't think that is consistent with what we're saying we want the message to be.
Oh, Fran. Yes.
Do you have any objection to the creche remaining where it is in Barnum Square? Do you have any objection, or is that?
I think
Yes, that's what
the
we
answer was yes.
I mean, you do.
Yes. I heard that clear.
Even based on, I just want to get this clear, even based on precedent, which we talked about, history and safety, you still think that?
Even more on history, I mean, there's been, how many things have been done that were done for decades, that are centuries, that to think about them continuing to be done, because, well, that's how things have been,
Well,
is horrifying
I
to
think if
me.
you get to
How
the
do you-
point where
Especially as-
something was clearly
How do you
identified
think
as
that
wrong.
people would feel in this?
Excuse me?
I think,
Can I-
Wait,
I'm
wait,
sorry,
wait,
I
yeah.
interrupted,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
How do you, how do you think people would feel in this town if the creche was moved and something else was put there, something that could easily have been located someplace else? How do you really think you're gonna make a lot of friends that way?
And
I-
I I don't know if that's
I mean,
important, but I would add, what
It's
it,
not about making friends.
I would add
It's
if-
such a
I mean,
rude
we're
comment.
talking about, we're talking about getting along in fairness and being neighbors, but let's say we had to move the crash and something else was put there. I mean, what about, the good neighbor policy? And remember, I asked last week, what percentage of the population of Bethel was religious? And nobody knew. I looked it up, it's 64%.
So 44%.
64%.
36% are not.
No,
And
it
they
doesn't
would like-
mean that they're atheists, it just means maybe they don't subscribe to a certain religion.
I didn't say they were atheists, I said
But I'm just saying that if we
34%
had
are
to
not
move the
religious.
creche, you're not really going to get a lot of goodwill for your cause.
So,
I don't know if that matters.
Maybe, I think it does
So-
matter.
Say if the creche didn't go there and you did not get to, no one got to put a banner there, a menorah went there.
So I wanna be
instead.
removed, I feel like
Yeah.
everyone keeps saying,
So-
associating me with the
I
banner,
know,
I'm not
I'm
even in the
sorry.
picture
I'm
with the
sorry.
banner, I mean,
So
I would rather just
would anyone
be separated from
object
anything.
if something else went there other than a banner or a menorah? I mean, is that what you're asking? Did
I think that
misunderstand
there's a
that?
misunderstanding in terms of, and I don't know if it began with Holly's candy or not, but I can't speak for anybody. I was not implying that we should put a Festivus pole in the one spot that can only support the crutch.
No, I
Yeah,
never
no, I,
mentioned
no,
the
you did a
Festivus
minute
Hall.
ago, you said that putting something small that could easily go someplace else, and that was never what I was saying. What I was saying was if there are multiple representations, that wants to have a large space to put a large thing, that no, I don't believe that it is equitable for one to have a priority placement of that one location. No, do I think that we should put a flagpole? That's, no,
Right.
me, I don't know, I don't think that's what
I'm
we were
I
saying.
wonder
really
if further
confused.
discussion
Gonna-
is warranted.
Yeah, I
It's
know,
really
I think
At
it's,
some point,
it
we
can
agree to
digress,
disagree.
right?
I'm just really confused.
I would just like to read from the case that came down today, Justice Breyer, he concurred, and in his concurring opinion, he pulled out a quote from the majority opinion, which is now the law of the land, and it says, "And as the court explains, ordering its removal," when its is the cross, okay? "Ordering its removal or alteration at this late date would signal a hostility toward religion that has no place in our Establishment Clause traditions." So, and I think what he means by that is, there is, when you have precedent and when you have something that's been there for a number of years, and that the majority of the community is enjoying and looks forward to, a removal for any other reason but just to remove it, okay, can be seen as an actual violation of the separation of church and
Yeah.
state, because
But
it's,
no one's suggesting removing it for the sake of removing it.
well, but removing it,
Town policy
ending the
removing it would be-
tradition. Listen, I'm not advocating one way or the other, but the law of the land does anticipate that in these situations where you have a historical precedent and a tradition, by disrupting that, instead of looking to add to
Yeah.
the tradition, either near it or in a different place, can be seen as a hostile
That's
takeover.
what I was
That's all
getting
I'm,
at.
I'm just putting that out
Thank
there.
you.
Can I make a request? With this
Yeah.
new law, can Attorney Lawler maybe factor this in? Because I do think this is new information, and I actually do think it's moved the previous Lemon verse whatever
Yeah.
to a different spot. And I don't
Oh,
know
it
that any of
overruled
it,
it.
I mean,
It-
it completely,
it-
it actually says on the first
o-
page, but I saw
it
the same thing,
overruled
that
it.
that
So
test
I-
is no longer gonna
I
be.
did make a note to
I think
ask
we
if
do
you
need his
could
comment, 'cause
comment on that.
Can I
We're back to
ask a
ceremonial
clarifying question
deism.
about the article?
Yes, yes.
Because I only just got it and skimmed it,
And it's not an article, it's actually the law.
It's
now.
a ruling.
right,
Yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah,
I'm saying,
yeah.
but what was sent to me was an article,
Oh, okay, yeah.
right? That was
Talking
fine.
about it.
A ruling.
Yeah.
Yes, so in there, they also mentioned that it represented a memorial
Mhm.
of some sort.
A World
I just
War
wanna
I
make sure that
memorial.
I understood, I also think that adds another element.
It
of
does,
difference,
it
Because
does.
it was the mothers who lost their
World War I
sons
memorial.
in the war, right, that was the original basis for creating the
Monument, a permanent
Monument.
monument.
So it didn't necessarily, well, I mean, it always had a religious component, but I do think the fact that it was representing more than that, change, it's not, in my
Well, I think, if I
Go
could just respond to that, Diana, I think that the whole point of them talking about the different symbols, I mean, in this decision, it talks about the Statue of Liberty, when we first brought the statute, accepted that, it meant one thing, the friendship and the relationship between France and the United States. It's come to mean a lot more. The symbols have changed over the
Lucifer,
years.
no.
Okay, the symbols have changed over the years. Now the Statue of Liberty represents freedom and, and an inclusion, everybody welcome to come onto our land, welcome to the United States. So I think the argument that they're making with this cross is that it's not just, yes, it is a religious symbol, but it's also come to symbolize the sacrifice of these men. And it's come to symbolize a community, a place for people to gather to honor the service and stuff. So, and I think the same argument could be made, whether it's the creche or the banner or a tree of knowledge, whatever it may be, as the symbol goes in, it may start off as one thing, but after years and years of growing and changing in community, it may come to mean something different. And in my opinion, I agree that the creche is more now not about, I'm Catholic, but I don't go to church. I don't participate in that, okay? I don't consider myself a religious person. But I think it looks like it's religious, but it's come to mean a little bit more, I think, in town. That's all.
And again, I welcome Attorney Lawlers, but I got the same thing, that different symbols can mean different things. A cross can be religious to somebody, and it could be sacrifice, as this ruling said. It could be, the Red Cross, it could be charity, it could be whatever, but it fundamentally started out as a religious symbol, and then has developed to be more. And I think, and again, from the feedback I got from very non-religious people, the creche to some people is a cultural symbol. No different than the town of Bethel, which means house of God. Doesn't mean we're gonna rename the town because it's not just a religious name, it's our identity. To some people, the name Bethel literally has religious history. The town started as a religious parish, but it's cultural. No, I think a lot of us would find it absurd if somebody came in and said, we gotta rename the town because it has this meaning that I find offensive, right? Different people look at different things and have different, it's not just religion for everybody. So I find a lot of it.
The one thing I got from Attorney Lawler's memo was that really we don't even have to we don't have to really consider the law. That's not our job, and so I agree. And to the extent that I might inject the law in, it's only a matter of that's my personal experience. It's not that I think that we should have to follow. I know we should follow the law, and I think the selectmen are going to make sure that any position they take is going to be lawful. So that just should just inform us and frame our discussion, but certainly we don't say, well, this says, That's what I got from Attorney Lawler's memo. Do you think now's a good time to maybe adjourn? Maybe we can think about, we do have to finish the agenda, we do have to, the minutes, we have to finish our last order item, but I'm thinking if we add a question to Attorney Lawler to maybe, in light of this new law, maybe reframe, he might not want to, he might say this isn't about the law. This is more about.
That's what he said.
I think so too, so I'm not sure how fruitful.
I don't know if the question should just be, does this new ruling change anything? And he may say, no.
No,
Right.
right.
He may say, well, it's leaned it more this direction, but it's still always gonna be open to some interpretation and
Yeah.
some comfort level. I don't know if further discussion on the spot, because it seems like
Yeah,
that's what we
that's
spent the bulk of our time here, is gonna sway a lot of people's opinions, and that's why ultimately there's a vote, and a recommendation, and there can be dissenting people in that vote, and I'm sure there will be. Does anybody think further discussion about the spot is going to change anybody's vote?
No.
We all agree that we've had adequate discussion on that piece, and if is there any other pieces that people feel we need to discuss, or we need additional information on, that we can all consider ahead of the next meeting?
I would add one thing. I've been listening to your discussion very carefully. I'm gonna give you a what if. Let's say you make a recommendation on a policy and we adopt it and we allow multiple displays. I think it was an issue that Fran brought up, what might somebody consider offensive is is probably the most subjective thing you have to deal with. And my question doesn't even have anything to do with a particular display itself. My question that I think you should think about before the next meeting is, what is the reaction of the community gonna be? And do you want to suffer through another season of TV trucks rolling through town and people protesting, which I've seen in many other towns? So in other words, even if we come up with a policy that is inclusive and it is fair to everybody and we, you know, this committee and the selectmen have no problem with it, is there going to be a reaction in the community that says, well, I really think that shouldn't be there? And then we're in a problem where we're complying with the law, we're being fair, we're 100% good on all of those technicalities, but the community is still upset. So I don't have any answer for that, I feel like I should apologize for making your job more difficult.
I'm just confused by the question you're asking us to reflect on what our personal reaction would be if the community at large were upset at the final decision.
No, not your personal reaction, how you perceive the community. Let me phrase it this way. You know, there was an alternative display put up last year. People were upset, but after a while, it wasn't a big deal. Would people get over it? You know, let's say you get the arm with the apple and the serpent, you know, and maybe in the first year that it's there, people are upset, and then maybe they say, oh, okay, that's the way it is. I have no way to answer that question. It's just something for you to consider. Would you want the community to avoid that controversy, or is it time that we got used to it? I don't know.
And I would add the flip side of the coin of the level of people that would be upset if it suddenly all just went away.
Yeah.
And I do think there
Oh,
would
yeah.
be a
Yeah,
large
that's why I
portion
asked
of
that.
people.
Of course.
That's why I asked
And at
that
the same
question.
time, maybe at
course.
some point people would get over it, other communities have.
Yeah.
You know, I do think there's two sides to that coin, and I don't think there's any chance that 100% of the people who live in Bethel are gonna be 100% thrilled with
Yeah.
whatever happens.
Yeah, this is
I'd be happy to get the 51%. But at some point, we are gonna make a decision, but I think it's considering the community reaction is important.
Yes, Danielle.
So I agree that I'm not sure that further discussion on that is gonna change any hearts or minds, but what I wanted to add before we move to the next item on the agenda and start to wrap things up is that I think that we should have a conversation in the group as to whether or not we think that one more meeting is going to be enough for us to resolve whatever issues that
No.
we have left to discuss, and maybe take a look at make a list. What else do we need to discuss? And how much realistic time do we need in order to accomplish that? So that we can, this has been our most productive meeting yet, I would like to say, at least from my perspective, so I think we had a much more meaningful conversation tonight than we've had thus far. If we can continue to be on track and have meaningful conversations, then can we set an endpoint?
I can agree. So what other topics do we need to discuss? I agree with that. Other than,
I think, let's think about it. We can, I think as an item on next week's agenda, we can talk about, you know, let's go through and maybe at the end, have one of the points at the end be, do we feel like we need more time to talk about this? I mean, I think, Tim, I honestly feel like at some point, what you said about the first order of business is, where is this committee with respect to its recommendation, whether holiday displays will be allowed at all? Because
I
that,
think we could vote on that and then move on.
yeah, and then
I'm fine with
I
that.
think we could do that, because
I'm
I
to a
have a
point that I
feeling
could
where
vote
it's
on
gonna
that.
go, just based on everybody's, but you know what? Nothing ceases to amaze me.
We talked about that first meeting. Do you
Yeah.
remember, Tony?
Does
brought
anybody feel
this
comfortable
up?
doing that, or do we need to just go home and kind of sleep on what we talked about and maybe put together, maybe you guys could email me things that you'd like to see, you know, discuss points that we can bring up, and,
I think we need to find out whether that's okay for us to reach out to you and do that.
Well, send your questions to me, and then, and I
Okay.
can get them to Holly, or, I mean, you could send them to Holly, but I can compile a list too, so I'll have it for the
I'd
agenda.
rather it go to Dee.
I think we need, well, I think we need to
Yeah.
be prepared to discuss them, so ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Ahead
She'll
of
send them
time.
out to us.
Yeah.
Oh,
Of
yeah, I'll
course,
send
of
them
course.
out
I
to
mean,
you,
I'm
but
fine
I'm just
with that.
saying, if you will send them to me, like, and I'll take the list that, you know, I've taken
Some notes.
little notes of everything that you've said and agenda items here. I'll compile all of that and get that out to you. I don't know if I'll get it done before noon tomorrow, but I'll have it to you by Monday at the latest. And then from that, if you have other questions that you wanna add to it, then we can do that at that time, and I'll add it to the agenda.
I think that's probably, because I think we've really, yeah, I think it's time. So I'd like to get back onto the agenda. The next and last item of business is consideration and approval of the minutes from our last special meeting, June sixth, 2019. Do I have a motion?
I will move to
Well-
approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Any
I'll
second?
second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I oppose, I thought they were kind of thin, that a lot of stuff was left out. I went back over a lot of my own notes, and I just was wondering, it just seemed like a very abbreviated
That's
version.
what minutes are, or an
I understand what
abbreviation.
minutes are, I've held that position, but I just seemed like it was very, very skimpy for the various things we discussed.
Motion passes, right, Molly?
Yeah, any abstentions? All in favor? Okay, so motion passes. So, can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion?
Second? All in favor? Okay, so we adjourn at 8:27 PM. Thank you, everybody.
Good job,
you.
Molly.
Oh, I'm learning as I go on the job training.
I think we're back to this, we're back to that. You mentioned it, you know, and God we trust, and the Bible, and, you know.
Are we off camera?